Good morning once again. So last week we did the smooth backgrounds, and this week, because so many people have asked, I am going to finish the chess pieces. So that's the plan for today. I had actually originally planned to do something sort of Valentine's themed, but just because this was requested, I'm going to do this one today instead. So we'll pretend this is the Queen of Hearts. All right. So. Good morning from all over the place here. We've got Connecticut and Pennsylvania. Yes, it is, Linda. It is a continuation of last week. Yes. Lancaster, Kingston, Ontario, Cayuga, Ontario, Oakville, Nottingham, England, Blackpool, UK. Yeah, we actually have sun. It's been pretty mild. I don't know what the temperature is today, but yeah, we've had a couple of mild days, although not very sunny. It's really nice to see the sun for a change. So let's just jump right on in here and get going so we can get into this. All right, so here's our piece, and that's what we did last week. We got that background in there, and I had decided to change this up a little bit, even though this is a color image, believe it or not. We decided to incorporate some color into this instead of just making it black and white. The photo's black and white, but because it's clear chess pieces on a white table, it doesn't reflect any color. You can see little maybe hints of blue in there, but there's not too much. So we changed up the background a little bit and made some blue in there. All right, so that means that in our chess pieces, we need to replicate some of that color. So one of the first things I want to do, as I always do, is to sort out what whites I want to keep. So I'm going to use a masking fluid. I had a brush here a minute ago. It stuck to my tape. Something I put behind me and it stuck to my tape. All right, so for my masking fluid, let me zoom out a little bit. No, I'm going to stay zoomed in because it's going to be kind of a small thing, but I am going to put some soap on my brush. This isn't a special kind of soap. It's just ordinary soap that you use to wash your hands with. All right, I'm going to leave that off in case I need it again. My masking fluid is I put it in a little jar. I put some color into it. I just put a couple of drops of cobalt blue into it so that it has a bit of color so that I can see what I'm doing. I don't mask very well when I don't see what I'm doing. So I put a little color into it so I can see where I've put the masking and see the edges I'm making and things like that. So just stirring that up. Don't shake it because I would be full of bubbles if I did that, and bubbles are impossible to get rid of. Well, at least for a long time after you've, once they're in there, once they get clinging onto your brush, it's hard to get rid of them. So I see a number of little highlights in here. So, I see the front of this knight here, and little bits and pieces all throughout. So I'm just going to go through and identify some of those big ones. I probably am not going to worry about every single solitary one. I'm also not going to worry too much about having it in precisely the right place. I mean, in the right place, but not, highlight for highlight. If I want to add in a couple more, I do, I can. So I'm looking for the brightest ones. Those are the ones I'm most concerned about. So I've got an area here that's quite light. I will just put my masking in there. I always start in the middle of a section, and then I take the masking fluid up to the line from that middle area. What I mean by that is, if you have a square, don't start at the edge of the square, start in the middle of a square, and then pull the masking fluid to the edges of the square. And the reason that that's good is because when you first pick up your masking fluid, there's a big blob on the end. So if you start at the edge, you might have bumps and lumps in your edges. So that's something you can keep in mind when you're masking something. like right here, you can see there's kind of a big blob that came off of my brush. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit because this is kind of a small area. I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. I'll just pull that over there. Now I'm going to be keeping my reference picture close by as I work on this because I want to be able to see what I'm doing. I haven't marked everything with my lines, with my pencil lines, because that would just be an awful lot to try to sort out. And since glass is like a kaleidoscope, you turn your head just a little bit and it all changes. So, the precise shapes and everything is not quite as crucial as a lot of people think. I take a lot of liberties in painting my glass, although people don't know it. I do it and then people go, wow, that looks like it's so real. And it really isn't. If you saw it up close, like you're seeing it pretty close right now, but if you saw it in person, you wouldn't say, oh my gosh, I thought it was a photograph. You only get that sensation when you see something like posted on Facebook or Instagram or something and it's really small. You're looking at it on your phone, so then you get the sense that that's what's happening. So there's a few little highlights up here in the top of the night, and I'm not going to worry about each and every solitary single bit here. I'm going to try and get lots in, because it's always easier to cover up something that was white than to get the white back, as you probably know in watercolor. But I can get some pretty accurate stuff as long as I can see where my masking fluid is. If I were doing this with white masking fluid or colorless masking fluid, I wouldn't be able to see what I was doing. And the tendency, when you don't have color in your masking fluid, the tendency is to put it on thicker than it needs to be because you're trying so hard to see it. And you feel like, oh my gosh, it hasn't covered because it's so transparent that you think it's not there. Oh, you're welcome. Where can you find the reference for this photo? Right here. Actually, one second. I'm going to, because I get asked this all the time. So if you know how to do a screenshot, I'm going to maybe go full mode here. Let me, I should have thought of this beforehand, but I'm going to just add something. And I know the screen is black, but you can still hear me. Just hang in there for a second. I'm just going to put the image up. Okay, so just a second and I'll get this the right size and you can take a screenshot and that's what you can work from if you want to try this and paint along. Okay, so there you go, full screen. There's your screenshot. Go ahead and take that and we'll get back to the masking. All right, take a picture of the image. Right. This is actually my image. A friend had loaned me some glass chess pieces and, a chessboard game that they had picked up at a garage sale. And I thought that would be really nice to use for a still life. Even though they're kind of colorless, I think that they're very interesting shapes and they reflect the light really nicely. All right, everybody got their screenshot? There we go. Okay, so if you missed it, you can watch the replay and get that. So I don't want to keep that on the screen too long. There you go. So, all right, so I'm going to continue on. I rinsed off my brush, so I'm going to soap it again. It doesn't have to be thick with soap. It just needs to make sure it's covering all of the bristles. So massage the brush into the soap, basically. And I'm going to continue on here with some of my highlights. And so I've got these sort of squiggly lines in here. I'm not worried too much whether I make them precise, but I want to get the general idea of this and in the right place. That'll be fine. And there's another one over here. And the reason that this makes it really easy to paint this afterwards is because, of course, I can put a wash in that whole area and not be concerned about painting around little shapes. Every time you paint around a little shape, it slows you down. And when it slows you down, you're going to have a much greater likelihood of brush marks and stuff. So I have never once regretted doing a nice job of my masking fluid. Not once. There's been many times I've been very happy that I took the time to do it, though. So a little bit of a nuisance, but so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to mask a little bit of this. I'll paint one of the chess pieces and we'll see how far we get. I'd also like to indicate the reflection on the table, the shadow on the table. But we'll see how the time goes. I may not get every single chess piece done in an hour, but I will do my best. All right, so I'm going to come in along here, this outer edge, and get some highlight there. Doesn't need to be pure white there. I think that just needs to be light, so I'm just going to leave that. And I'm going to move on to the next chess piece. Let's move this down a little bit. Maybe I'll fold this over so that you can see what I see. It's not a bad idea to keep your reference right close to where you're working, especially if it's the same size like this. It is a lot easier to sort out complex areas. You know, when you have crystal or something like that, and there's an awful lot to sort out, then, you know, it can be really helpful to have that. There's a few of these areas I could probably just paint around, but just so that I don't forget about them, that's easy enough to do. Just so I don't forget about them, I'm going to put some of this on. And if I mask more than needed, it's very, very simple to just come in and tone down any areas that are too bright. That's a piece of cake, just to tone things down. What isn't a piece of cake is to come in and get those areas back if they've been covered up. So I have a tendency to mask a little bit more than needed rather than too little. I can hear my house creaking. And I don't know if that's because it's getting cold out or if it's getting warm out. One or the other. Or I've ghosts. Maybe I have ghosts. All right. A few little sparkles here and there. Just a couple of little specks just to make that interesting. All right, so a little bit down the edge here. One thing to keep in mind when you are masking, though, is that all masking is going to give you a crisp edge, that it's going to give you a very hard line. So don't mask areas just because they're a light area. You want to mask with intention. You want to make sure that you are only masking areas that are really very, very bright and with a crisp edge, which happens a lot in glass. So I tend to use masking fluid pretty generously with glass subjects. But if it's a like a, you know, if you're trying to make a shape and it goes from a very light white or something like that, and then it starts to slowly turn into another color, that's not a place where I would put masking fluid. I would avoid that. I would just wet it and not paint, not apply paint there, but come up to, come close to that area. So just let the paint sort of leave, like melt into that highlight, but leave a generous amount of white, like just wet paint, wet paper, in order to leave that area light, but with a softer edge. So I'm going to come along some of these little ribs, I guess you want to call them that, along here, a little bit here, doing my best to sort it out. But you know what? One thing that's really surprising about painting glass subjects is the amount of forgiveness you really have. Because guess what? You're not showing anybody the photo, right? You're not showing it to anybody. And how are they going to know if it's right or wrong? You know, unless they see the actual reference photo. And even if it is wrong, who cares? It's got the highlights. It's got the shadows. You've got all the values that you need. It represents the light properly. You know, whether the highlight was, a little bit too left or right, is really not going to be a deal breaker. Right, so there's a couple of little specks of just sparkle within this, and so I'm just going to dabble in a little bit. I did not trace everything, so some of this I'm just, have to find a big shape. I traced in big shapes mostly, and then I used those big shapes to locate where the smaller shapes would be. If you trace everything, you take the dirt, if you're tracing things, if it's complicated, I will trace because it's complicated, and it saves a lot of time to do it by tracing. But if I've traced something, and then I take it off, and all I have is like 1,000,001 lines. It's overwhelming. It's like you don't even know where to start. So trace the major shapes, and you can sort the smaller ones out from there. You don't have to transfer every single solitary little line. Make yourself that crazy. So let's put a highlight in there. Now, a lot of this masking is going to dry fast. Like, I'm not masking large areas or putting on thick masking or anything like that. They're relatively tiny little sections. So I'm not really worried about how long it's going to take to dry. I'll be able to come back to that night and just start painting. It's probably dry now, actually. So I don't know how many of you have been have ever tried or used permanent masking fluid. Permanent. It's I really honestly can't figure out what the real need for permanent masking fluid is. If anybody knows the answer to that, please type it, because I want to know what the real purpose of permanent masking fluid is. It really, I've had many students accidentally buy it, put it on their painting, try to remove it, only to be heartbroken that they can't. And yeah, it's not great for certain things. All right, so I've got 2 of the chess pieces with masking fluid on them now, and I'm going to clear off my brush, and every once in a while I will give my brush a good rinse just to make sure that it's not starting to dry in my brush itself. I just rinse it off, re-soap, and carry on. So this is the 3rd time I've soaped up my brush to start masking again. My masking fluid, by the way, is it's very fluid. Can you see how runny it is? And one thing I didn't talk about is the materials I'm using. I'm working on Arches 140-pound cold press. There is an actual part 1 to this where I painted this background. That's why it's done, if you're just tuning in for the first time. And so that was previous week's demonstration. I was illustrating how to do smooth washes. So, and I basically spent all my time just making a nice smooth wash. Of course, with washes, there's a lot of dry time. This is going to go a fair bit faster because of the fact that it's small areas and we're not doing big wet washes. So, all right. So now we're on to our last piece here. And I'm looking at wherever there's the sparkle here. So permanent masking fluid. You get real amazing effects using permanent masking fluid. Wait a minute, I've got to read back. Permanent masking fluid. It's created to make new artists to watercolor crazy. Yes, I think it is. Permanent masking fluid once in a workshop. Okay, so Micrologus 2, how did you use it? I would be very interested to know how you used it, and why it is, if you can describe how you used permanent masking fluid, I would love to know that. You know, I don't know everything, and I have seen it demonstrated with, you know, I know you can add color to it. The size of paper that I'm using, Catherine, is it's 9 by 11. So the finished painting is going to be 8 by 10. So I've allowed for a bit of taping on the edges, and that's it. So the finished size will be 8 by 10, which means that if it turns out really nice, I'll be able to stick it into a frame that I can buy in the store. How large to make paintings and to make them easier. Oh. Okay, so how large to make a painting? Okay, so I think what you're asking is, you know, how do I decide on what size to make my finished painting? And well, sometimes I just do a larger, you know, sometimes I have a finished place in mind where I want to put something. You know, that might be a deciding factor. Subject matter. If I'm doing a hummingbird, maybe doing it like 3 foot by 5 feet might be a little overkill. You know, it sometimes is relative to the subject matter. So if I were doing, say, a buffalo, I might do it really big, right? Because it's a large animal. It's how we associate with that. If I'm doing something small, I will paint it relatively small. You know, basically kind of keeping it in context with the subject matter itself. I don't know if that helps, but if it's something modern, you know, if I'm doing something kind of contemporary looking, slick or something like that, I might use it large, just because, you know, as a design element in a home. I mean, what else do we do paintings for, right? But homes and offices and galleries and stuff, you know, we want to make an impression. So we're going to, you know, I might decide on painting something very large for impression, right? If I want to make an impact, I will paint it very large. And sometimes it's kind of fun to take a small subject and make it large. If it's like, you've all seen like macro florals, right? Where it's very, very close in on the floral, but it's blown up to a really huge size. And it really makes an impact because it's such a pop of color and dramatic, right? And it's kind of like a bee's eye view. You know, you feel like you are a bee in a plant, in a flower, because it's so large, larger than you. So it kind of gives you a different perspective of the flower than, you know, most people would normally have. So that can be very effective as well. But I guess the bottom line is that there's a number of deciding factors as to whether I work large or whether I decide to work small. This is, I would say approximate, well, it's a little larger than life, I suppose. These pieces were pretty small, but I didn't want to do a really tiny painting, so they're a little larger than life. Not hugely, just a little bit. Okay, so Yes, some people do use wax candles to create the appearance of dry brush. For those of you that may not know that technique, it is when you take a colorless candle and you drag it across your watercolor paper, and it will create, it'll skip over the texture of the paper and give you this sort of coarse, broken line when you paint over it, because the wax, of course, doesn't absorb any of the watercolor, so it acts as a resist. And so it's wonderful for, you know, creating things like sparkle on water and stuff like that. But the permanent masking fluid, I got to find out what this one's. Oh, did I trace the details on the pieces after removing last week's masking fluid? I've had masking fluid remove my tracings. Yes, that is what I did. You will notice down here on the bottom of my picture, there's a couple of little lines right there and right there. That's what allows me to line this paper up with my drawing again, or on my watercolor paper. It allows me to line that up again. So before you start, put some registration marks on your tape, not on your watercolor paper, but on your tape, and you'll be able to line it up in the exact same place, even though you can't see through this printout. So that's a little tip. It is something that I guess I started doing quite a while ago. When I finished college, I did go to art school, and when I finished, I was working in a printing company, and that is one of the things that I learned there is, you know, registration marks. You have to use it on everything. Same thing with, you know, I also went to college for animation, believe it or not. I didn't pursue a career in animation, but I did take college courses on that. And one thing you have to do there is, of course, you have to line everything up, one drawing after another. It has to be all lined up. You need to use registration marks. Well, in animation, they actually have a bar. It's called an animation bar, and it's got little pegs on it, so peg bar, and you can put each drawing sort of lines up with the next one. It's punched, so it does that. But I don't suppose they do it that way anymore because of computers. They went into computer animation, and then everything that I learned was pretty much archaic. So I went into fine art because that's the best way to get rich quick, right? It's a great get rich quick scheme. All right, so one of the things I am masking here is some of these hard shapes within the shadow. Only the hard ones, not the soft ones. The soft ones I'm going to paint around, but these hard ones I'm going to, hard-edged ones I should say, hard-edged highlights in the shadows, or these bright spots, I'm going to mask some of that. So there's a couple of lines that come through here, and I'm going to put masking on there. Hope you can see that. Because I know that if I tried to paint around those, they would end up getting lost. So there's some of these that are crisp and some that are soft, so I'm going to do some crisp, some with masking fluid, and some not. Little sparkles, couple of little sparkles in there. We've got a hard edge right here, so got some lint on my brush. So I'm going to go along this line, but I'm not going to fill it all in. You can see that this line here, in this this refracted light, is got this hard line here, but then it fades off there. So I'm going to just do where the hard line is only. All right, I think I'm done my masking. So I'm going to rinse out my brush, put the lid back on my masking fluid, put my soap away. That'll be dry very quickly. I can certainly come into my first chess piece and start painting right away. This one's plenty dry, so I'm going to zoom in on this one. And as I said, I'm using Arches 140-pound cold press paper. I'll be using mostly DaVinci watercolors. Some, I have to remember what blue I used last week, but I think it was in Danthrone. And okay, so I'm going to start with this first little chess piece, and when I look at my reference, a nice fold in the middle of it now, but when I look at my reference, I see that there's this darker area coming through here, and then it starts to get light. Well, probably the easiest way for me to do that is to wet that section first. So I'm going to take a small squirrel hair brush. This is a number 7 round squirrel hair brush, as you can see, and I am going to wet this section right here. Now, when I did mask this before, I did put masking over the whole piece of the whole chess piece. Whenever you mask over something, you will find that it's ever so slightly different to paint on afterwards, because when you remove the masking, it also lifts up a little bit of that sizing that's on the paper. So as the sizing is lifted, the paper becomes a little bit more absorbent. And you'll find that the paper feels maybe a little bit rougher than it did before. It's going to always feel a little bit smoother with some sizing in the paper. It's not enough to be bothersome. I'm just pointing out that you'll probably notice something. So now that I have this blue color behind here, I'm going to have to duplicate that color. So I'm going to use this in Danthrone blue. And I believe I used, I'm going to say neutral tint, I think I used with that. I could be wrong. It could be Payne's Gray, but it'll be close enough. I'll be fine. But I want a blue, and I don't want it a bright blue. I want it a little bit duller. I'm going to have paper towel in my hand. All right, blot my brush so I don't overwhelm. And I'm going to start coming in here with this color. And I'm starting in the dark area so that I'll know whether or not I am too dark. I don't want to start where it's light, because of course, what if my brush has too much color in it? It's not the way to find out. So I'm coming in here. I know that as I paint into a wet surface that things are going to get drier, or things are going to dry lighter, I should say. And so I need to compensate for that. So I'm coming in here with stronger color in here and rinsing my brush, and I'm going to walk down some of this other color down along the back of the chess piece and down into this area here, but it's a little bit lighter here in the front, so like in this area here. So I'm kind of avoiding that so that I can keep that a little bit lighter. All right, so you can see how the paper's a little bit roughed up. I've got even, some lint and pills and, a couple of little things in there. But that will settle down. Mostly what I'm doing here is washes, so I'm not really too concerned. I'm going to now just soften this edge. All right, so with much lighter color, dilute the color. I'm going to put some light color up here. I will be careful not to touch that. There's a little bit here in the front, and I can actually leave a little sliver without touching that previous color if I need to. That's easy enough to do. And it's not much of a problem in glass if you leave those little white bits. It looks perfectly acceptable. Let's see, now in here, there's like a funny little shape, and if it's a funny little shape, that's all you paint. Don't try to sort it out in your head. You make yourself crazy trying to sort things out in your head, like, what is that little shape? What's that supposed to be? I don't know what that's supposed to be. I'm going to have to zoom in and figure out what that's supposed to be. And people just go crazy trying to figure out stuff that they really don't need to figure out. Just, if it looks like a blob, paint a blob. That's all you need to do. All right, so I've got a little bit of a transition there. And, oh, Marilyn, yes, it could have been easy to use packing tape last week. That could have been easy. I was in a little bit more of a rush. So, yeah, I can demonstrate that on another upcoming project, I suppose. But I'm going to keep moving along here. What about the bottom of the one that is laying over, no masking yet? Yeah, no, I've just masked that now. Yes, Susan, you're right. There is a Winsor Newton video on how to use masking fluid, and that's how I know on the permanent masking fluid that you can add color to it, because that was what they gave in their example. And I tried it, and it works really well if you're painting yellow over red. Not so well if you're painting a dark color over a light color, though. That was my discovery with it, and but you know, maybe I just haven't got the knack of it yet. All right, so if I wanted to, I could start incorporating other colors into here. What about grabbing some of this pink on my palette here? Let's drop some of that in. I know there's no pink in the picture. So what? I can put my own colors in. Let's put a little bit of that in, like back to blue. And I'm going to paint this section in here. And over here to the right hand side. Now, because I have masking fluid on there, I can pretty much just paint this in like a big wash. It's pretty convenient. Now there is a little bit more softening down here, so I'm just going to put in a light color, very pale, almost just water. Then I'll pick up more color. And add it in where it's a little bit darker, and that way it just sort of melts together and gives me this really nice softened effect. But one thing you might notice that I'm doing is I'm sort of exaggerating the lights and darks a little bit, and that's kind of a key thing to making glass look really shiny. You need to exaggerate things a little bit. I'm just going to read back. There's a question here. Oh, no, it wasn't a question. It was a comment. Okay. I read about the wax candles, the size of the paper. I answered. Yeah, it is a pity you can't post any photos here. But anyway. And welcome to those of you that are just arriving. We are just starting our first piece here of our glass, and I'm just coming in with a damp brush just to soften a little bit. If I get a hard edge I don't want, I just soften it with a damp, thirsty brush. There. So you can already start to see the beginnings of our piece here. And of course I'll come in and I will start to add in the darks afterwards. So I basically will put in all my mid values and then I add my darks as my last touch. Try transfer film for vinyl. Yes, there you can actually buy a it's like a MacTac, clear MacTac kind of thing, but it's actually a masking film is what it's called. And but you have to be careful, because one thing I discovered is that if you're using a low tack, which is perfectly fine if you're airbrushing, not so good for watercolor. So you need the higher tack, like the stickier one, that's going to adhere to your paper, because if it doesn't stick really well, that paint goes underneath, especially if you're doing a really wet wash. With that film, I just find even with the tacky one, because it's intended more for airbrushing, you really have to watch that you don't get too wet with your washes using that product. But it's great because it comes in a sheet. You can roll it down your page and sort of squeegee out all the bubbles and cut out your shape, and voila, it's quite nice to use. So I'm going to move over into the this taller chest piece here. I was looking for my zoom here. I'll zoom out a little bit since it's a little bit bigger. But you can see my first one. There we go. All right, so now I've got my next chest piece. I'm going to fold my page, once again, my paper, so that I can keep my reference close by. I think it's still a little damp, but it's not damp enough to bother my paper, I hope. All right, so same coloring, but there's absolutely nothing at all to keep me from painting in maybe a little pink here and there. Why not? I don't want to make these transitions like really crazy and bright or anything like that, or shocking color or something like that. They're subtle. But those little hints of the little pop of different colors within your glass can make it really interesting. But don't make it so crazy that it doesn't relate to your background. You want to make sure that you have, some connection to your background, or it's clear glass after all. So we want to make sure that it all goes together. Now I'm going to come in with my a little bit more of my color. Now I'm going light color to start with. These are light values. This is really going to make those white areas sparkle, but I'll come in with some extra darks after this. So this section here is going to be dark, but I'm not going dark yet. I'm just going with my light values for now, and then I'll come in with darker values after that. So let's go kind of switching back and forth between a little bit more pink and a little bit more blue. Not being too crazy fussy about it. I think it'd be kind of neat even to use maybe a little cerulean blue. I think that would be kind of cool. Just put a little touch of that in there. It'll make the painting more interesting than just using grays. It can look okay with grays, but it'll look boring, right? So just that little pop of color once in a while can make it, a lot nicer, I think. Let's wet my brush and just let this part fade to the edges. So that was clean water I put on each side of that color in the middle. And that was in order to give me a gradation. And back a little bit lighter here. Trying not to overlap my background. I mean, I want to touch the line, I just don't want to go over it, because going over it will make kind of a dark edge on all my pieces, right? And I am noticing as I said, the difference in the paper, having used masking fluid on this previously. One thing I didn't take the time to do, but I certainly could have, was to place a piece of plain copy paper over top and actually rub down those fibers again. The fibers are raised up because of the removing of the masking fluid. And I've talked about this before, but it's also a good idea not to rub in every which direction when you are removing your masking fluid, because you are lifting fibers, and if you're lifting them in both directions, it will make it even rougher. So just go in one direction, like patting a dog, and you'll have a much smoother. Now I'm going to go straight into my shadows here, into this shadow section with this color. And there's going to be a few areas which I think I can lift out, but mostly I'm going to, if I get to a lighter area, I'm just going to paint with clean water and then switch back and forth that way. So come in along the bottom here. And there's a whole bunch of kind of dappled little bits. So I'm just going to dabble in some color there. And there's this shape. And this is on dry, but then I'm going to just go over that. I'm going to just give that like just a moment to stay there. Now I'm going to take a damp brush, one that I've blotted, and I'm going to go over this, and that will soften up what I've just done. Move a little bit of that color. So you see it'll be there, but it'll be a little bit lighter. I could do it the other way too. I could wet the area first, just damp, and paint into it as well. That also works. But you know, if you get into an area, it's like, oh boy, it's already dry. There's something you can do. And it's always really darkest right where something makes contact. So right here, right under this night, I'm going to go a little bit more neutral tint right in this little spot there. I'm going to go a little darker right there. Indanthrone Blue is the one I'm using. Actually, you know, I had said that it was DaVinci Watercolors, but Indanthrone Blue that I'm using is actually from Core, which is a golden paint company, makes Core watercolors. QOR. And I'm just going to soften some of this. So you see that there's like little channels of lighter and darker areas within there. So are they the same exactly as the photo? Absolutely not. Does it matter? Absolutely not. There, I've got a few light areas. That's all I need. Make sure I've got a few little bits in there. Okay, so I've got my light values on 2 of the chess pieces. I'm going to come over to this last one, but I'm going to dry this because if I don't dry this, then I'm going to paint along this chess piece, and I'm going to hit the wet paint from the shadow of the previous ones. So I'm just going to take my gun here and dry that really quick. That'll be enough. I don't want to bake my masking fluid on there. And Oh, you're very welcome, Dave. Yeah, Dave says he bought some of the same brushes I'm using. And case you aren't aware, all my materials that I typically use are listed on my website. I have a page called Materials. I have my materials. I also have a list of sources. If you scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll see a list of various sources where you may or may not be able to purchase different supplies. It's one thing I get a lot of questions about from my students because our local art store is often out of stock. So, they want to know, where can I get this? Where can I get this? So I decided it's just more practical for me to put it on my website. So it's all there. I'm coming over to this last chess piece now, and for the most part, it's kind of a mid-value. That might be a little dark. Let's thin that down. Quickly rinse my brush and spread that out before that grabs the paper. So it's a light value. Need to make it lighter than the background. A little lighter in that area, so I'll just skip over that. So I keep my reference picture right nearby so that I can easily see the shapes, whether it has a sharp edge, a soft edge, whatever the case may be, and so that I can respond very quickly, and so I don't lose any information looking back and forth, like turning my head to see the reference back to my painting. Nothing gets lost in that short time, and it's surprising how much can. Just it's only a short distance between your reference picture and your painting, but you'd be surprised how much information could actually get lost along the way. It's kind of like worrisome, to be honest. You look one way and you think, oh my gosh, how could I possibly have forgotten that already? But we're human. And fairly light value. Let's maybe use a little pink in here too. And you see, I'm just, when I'm adding a splash of color in, it's not any particular places, and as long as I'm keeping the same value, it will work. Oh, that's too bad, Chris. I'm sorry. Yeah, I hope you're over your COVID very soon. Yeah, we don't hear it so much in the news anymore, with a war going on and stuff. We don't hear as much about COVID, but, it doesn't mean it's gone away. It just means there's other news to report as well. So it is around still, unfortunately. All right, so I'm going to come in here. This is pretty much mid-value I'm putting on everything. I've already saved my lights, my highlights with white using masking fluid. And I'm coming in with my mid values now, and then I will come in with my darker values. Now let's soften that edge a little bit. I think that needs to be a little bit softer. There. And these are just, just choices I'm making. If you ask me to do this again, I might make different choices the second time. I don't know. I might change my mind each time I paint something. I might see something different, something I missed the first time or something like that. So I'm not saying that, every stroke I'm making is the right stroke. I'm just saying it's close enough. And I think, you kind of have to adopt an attitude like that in watercolor. Like, don't fuss and agonize over stuff. Close is pretty good. And if you get close, what you'll end up with is a very good representation of what you're doing. Maybe not hyper-realism because it's not exact, but who cares? I mean, you've got a fresher looking painting. And I can tell you that a fresher looking painting trumps a perfect painting any day. In watercolor anyway. Well, in most mediums, I think, you know, if it looks like it was fresh and intentional, I think that that goes a very long way in creating a successful watercolor. So don't agonize over the small stuff. Not worth it. Nor is it important. All right, so I'm just about to the tip here, and most of it's pretty light, but I'm going to come in with some of my blue mixed with my neutral tint, and I want to get the shape nice here. And I can hardly wait to come in with the darks now, but I want to continue this on into my into the reflection, like, or into the shadow on the table. So coming down here, I didn't do a lot of drawing in the shadow other than its outline. I am working on dry paper, although I am working quickly, and I'm working from one area across. I'm not going to jump all over the place when it comes to the shadow, because it all needs to be connected, right? Now there is some like little beams of light right through here, so I'm going to lift those out later. I already know that that's, you know, what my option is going to be. Now, if for whatever reason, like, you get to this point in your painting and you've got an urgent phone call that just came in, you have to take it. What I would do is rinse your brush and blot it and soften the edge where you're leaving off. All right, because trust me, this happens to me very often. That, you know, not that I have urgent phone calls, just, you know, I get an interruption of some kind and I have to stop. So I rinse and I soften an edge. And what that does for me is that it will allow me to dry this, and then I can wet the area and continue on, and you won't see where I left off. That's often a big problem and the source of panic when you're trying to fill in an area and it's complex. And so this is one way that I found that I can sort of carry on without fear, basically. So I'm going to let that cool down, and okay, Janet, see you later. Okay. Oh, okay. All right, so I'm going to come back into my color. This is my Indanthropon, a little bit of, it's Core Indanthropon and DaVinci neutral tint. No, sorry, pardon me, that was a Winsor Newton neutral tint. I'm not using any DaVinci. Most of what's on my palette is DaVinci, so I'm going to have to revise my descriptions there. So coming up into here, I can continue this on, and then when I meet up with that previous section, I will just start with water and carry on. Oops, I grabbed a granule that wasn't dissolved. There we go. So, and I can carry on, and you won't see where that connected. It will be seamless. So rinsed and blotted brush. Now I can just soften this edge here. Some of the highlights in here I will end up just lifting instead of trying to paint around all of that little stuff. I didn't want it too crisp, so I didn't really want to opt for masking those areas off. I thought it was important to keep them fairly soft looking. So that's why I have decided already that I'm going to do that as a lifting. All right, and anywhere, let's fill up my brush a little bit more here. I need more runny paint. My paint is kind of stiff, like dry. So I want to make sure that my brush has got runny paint in it. And the reason I want that is because I know I want to take this edge and soften it. Damp brush, and I can soften that edge. But your brush better be damp. Like when you use a damp brush, better make sure it's drier than the paper. Otherwise, you're just going to create a blossom. So come along here. Go a little more blue in here, or a little bit darker in here, I think. I like the strength of these shadows. I think they're quite nice. I guess this just continues over. There we go. And the rest of this I'm just going to fill in. Just not worry all about all the little bits. Just going to fill that in. Shape the bottom of the chest piece nicely. Oops, just grabbed the wrong color there. And it's pretty dark over here, so I'm just going to go a little bit darker in this section. A little lighter as it comes up, so I just rinsed out my brush. There, it's all wet, so it should melt together. Let's move that over a little bit so you can see the whole thing. And I'm going to zoom out just so you can sort of see this stage where I've got these mostly mid values. I've got some darker values in here. I'm trying not to touch this too much, but I'm going to start coming in with some darks. So I'm going to take my same indanthrone, but I'm going to use a little bit more of the neutral tint this time. Using it heavier consistency, so that means less water. And I'm going to be working on dry for some of these details. So here we go. I've got this darker area in here. Darker area in here. Now there's degrees of darkness. There are some areas that are going to be nice and dark, and then there's going to be other areas that are going to be sort of like somewhere in between medium and dark. But I'm putting these light ones in. I put the light values in, now I'm putting the dark values in, and then I'll be able to sort out those in-between ones. That'll be easy once the darks are on here. And sometimes I will do this in my paintings. I will put, I'll get the dark in so that I can gauge all the rest of my values a little better. But this will make just a tremendous amount of difference, just these darks. So I'm coming along here. Trying to get a reasonable line here, and so now I'm going to come into my tall piece, and I'm going to get this middle area in here painted in. This one's pretty obvious. I guess because of the angle that it's at, it's really showing a lot of dark in this particular section. Just getting back to the removal of masking fluid and how it removes your tape. Yeah, you would want to plan that out in advance. In other words, if I were to, as I did here, you know, I was planning to maybe put this drawing back on. I didn't bother doing all this drawing because I knew that the masking fluid I was using would take that off. So plan ahead. Don't do a lot of work on something that is likely going to disappear with the removal of your masking fluid. So the color I'm putting on here, I'm trying to make it equal to the background. As I see in my photo, it is pretty much the same value. So this is where I really start comparing values and looking to see, okay, is this lighter than this or is it darker than that? And everything is relative in your painting. So everything compares to something else that you've got in there. And you know what? That applies not just to things that are glass, but it applies to mostly anything you're painting in watercolor. So whether it's glass, whether it's a landscape, whether it's portrait, whatever the case may be, I will often get to this stage in my painting and I'll start putting in a few darks because I know that those darks are going to help me gauge things and get the rest of the values more correct. I'm also looking at thickness of lines. There's some of these lines here in this little section that were quite thin, and then I've got some that are actually tapered and thicker in the middle. So I'm keeping things like that in mind, and look for little unexpected things like this little dark area right there, little dark area over here on the right side. You know, those are easy to miss, so look for those types of things. Here we go. Watercolor medium. Watercolor medium, I have some actually. It is basically a flow agent for your watercolor. So if you're trying to do something like get a nice wash. Sorry, I'm reaching over here. See if I can find it. Oh, I lied. I don't have it here. But it is basically a flow medium that helps to suspend the pigment within your washes a little more evenly. Oxgall liquid is also similar to that in that it will help suspend your pigments and even out washes. All right, so I'm looking for sections now, and I'm finding it very hard to see my lines at this point, so I have to do a little bit of estimating where these things are. But if I were really stumped and really didn't know where I was supposed to go, guess what? I have the registration marks that I put down earlier. I could put my drawing back on, I could find it, and redraw, retrace whatever it is I need to do. So that is always an option. And I'm not trying to figure out what these shapes mean or what they're reflecting. I'm not thinking anything along those lines. I just see a shape, I paint a shape. It's a dark shape, so I make it a dark shape. And basically that's what it boils down to, is I'm just sorting out shapes and values. Going to soften that a bit. Just think it's a bit strong. All right, last one. I'm going to come in and Aquapasto. I actually have some. It is, well, the one that I have is Winsor Newton textile medium. I will have to, you know what? One of these weeks, I'm going to do a demonstration on various mediums. I've got several that I can try. Some I've never tried. Granulation medium. There's texture medium. I've got permanent masking fluid. I've got iridescent medium. I've got oxgall liquid. Lifting preparation. Regular masking fluid. Yeah, I've got several mediums that I could actually probably keep us occupied for an hour, just working on various things there. But I want to get on with this, and I'm going to put in some of the darks on this chess piece at the bottom. And as I said, I've kind of lost my, I don't see my lines anymore. That wash that I put down kind of makes it really hard to see my lines, so I'm making my best guess. I'm going to put this in here, rinse my brush, blot it, and soften that edge. You got to go very fast with that step if you want to soften. It doesn't take very long at all for that to dry. And then all of a sudden you've got something you can't move and you can't soften. So I'm just painting in the idea of a few little details there. And now, granted, you've got to remember when you see me posting pictures of like silverware and glass and things like that, you got to know that I'm taking a lot more time to be precise about things. You know, I'm definitely putting in more time. Like one that I posted recently was silver, and that was actually one of my Zoom workshops. That is available. I'm getting a lot of questions. Is it available? Yes, it's available on my website as a past workshop now. The workshop is over, but I did record it, and so that's how all my past workshops work. I record it. I take progress photos along the way. It's several hours long, so it is something that you know, we really get into the nitty-gritty of every little detail. So it's not like these demos where it's sort of fast and quicker. I mean, I'm getting to the essence of it, but I'm not getting to the nitty-gritty of it. And so my Zoom workshops are a little bit more in-depth if you want to check those out. And I'm just continuing on with some of these darker sections. Try to get that shape right. I think my paper's a little bit folded, so it's giving me funny distortions, but it's because I folded it to hold it close. But let's get into here, and we'll get a few of these little lines in here. And you know, sometimes, especially when you have things like this chess piece is not only lying down, but it's lying down at an angle. And you know, unless you're really quite competent with your perspective, this one can mess you up. So that earlier screenshot might help you out in terms of trying this one out. But for the most part, I didn't really post my line drawings for my YouTube demos because they were supposed to be demos, not classes really. And but I don't mind if you want to try it. It's fine. The idea is to learn, so whatever helps you learn is okay by me. Somebody was asking me yesterday, do I still like teaching? You know, I've been doing this a long time. Do I still like teaching after 30 years? And I absolutely do. I love it. I think, you know, teaching is something that when a student has success, it's just as good as when I had success. You know, it's like I feel as excited as they do. And I don't know if that's everybody feels that way. I don't know. Like, you know, but it's like, you know, if your child has a success at something, you feel so delighted for them. You feel their delight. And I guess I still get that out of teaching. And I never get tired of it. Never gets old. So let me just get a few more little darks in here, just squiggling them in. I can't really tell what it is. It's just kind of an abstract shape, so that's what I'm painting. All right, so we're getting there. It's really coming together. So there's, you know, obviously a few more details. Now these ones aren't quite as dark. For example, our little, this is a knight, I believe. I'm not a chess player, so I'm not that up on the pieces here. This is, I think, a rook and a king. I don't know. And a knight, I think. I don't know. You can tell me if I'm right or not. So I'm just going to add in a few more of these little indications. I guess this is kind of how they decided to make the mane look like a mane with these little lines. So I don't want to come in with really heavy paint with this, and in fact I think I probably did go a little heavier than I wanted, but really thin color. This is a light area, so I don't need to use really heavy paint. Using heavy paint will all of a sudden bring all the attention to this little section of the of this piece, only because of the contrast, right? There'd be so much contrast that that's all you would see. I'm not counting them. I'm, you know, in some ways I'm kind of guessing at where these are, but I think I'll do okay. But, you know, if you're not good at guessing, well, by all means, go ahead and put your line drawing back on, trace it, do what you need to do to get the result you're looking for. But I'm going to come in now with some of this. There's some lighter, or some slightly darker, not as dark as what we did before, but there's kind of a lighter section right in here. This funny shape. So I'm putting that in there. And so you notice what a lot of what painting glass is about is just finding those abstract shapes and getting them in the right shape and the right value. That's kind of the essence of it. I'm going to imply some detail here. I'm not going to fuss over it. A little bit there. But I'm not making any of these transitions at this stage very strong, very stark, because I don't want it to take away from the sparkle on the piece, and I don't want it to be too obvious. It's really not that much of a difference. It's very easy when people are doing a detail to go much darker than they need to on things because they're feeling like, oh gosh, you know what, it's a detail, so I have to do it really dark. But no, you have to thin down your paint sometimes in order to keep the subtleties in there. All right, and find a few more places where I can put just subtle things. So this is like the final touches that I'm doing here, right? Where I'm just sort of finding final touches, final subtle things. A little bit darker in the middle of that. Just adjusting some of these values here. I see some of them are a little bit darker, so I'll just darken them down. Little adjustments. And then the final thing, of course, is going to be taking off that masking fluid, and we'll have our chess pieces. So I think we're actually going to get all of this done today. But I'm just going to soften some of that. Blot my brush. It was so fast, my blotting of my brush was so fast, you probably missed it. But I need to work as quick as that, because if I don't, the line dries. It doesn't take any time at all for a line to dry on your paper, especially, you know, if you've put it on dry paper. So if you need to soften it, you need to just rinse, blot, and get in there right away. So for here, for example, I'm going to put a little bit of a shadow in here. Rinse, blot, soften. And I can soften it if I'm fast. If I'm too slow, I just know I'm not going to have the time to do it. It's all of a sudden going to be gone, like dried, and I can't move it. Especially with something like neutral tint, which kind of will be a little bit permanent. We'll grab the paper and then it's hard to move. Certain colors are like that. You know, they will move easily. Some colors will move easily and others not so much. Rinse, blot, soften that edge. Okay, so could I fuss more? Probably. I probably could. I could probably go on for a good long time, but that would be a workshop, not a demo. So I'm just going to dry this real quick and remove my masking. Yes, you do paint along with me if you wish. Many people, however, will, and I have many that paint along because, you know, that's their dedicated time to paint, so they're painting as they're watching. But others will just simply watch along and then paint along with the video, with the recording. Because you do get, with my videos, with my Zoom workshops, you get lifetime access. So it's not like it's only there for a week or a month. You can have it as long as you want. Plus I take progress photos, you get a line drawing, you get the reference picture, you get all that good stuff. So you get a lot more with the Zoom class than you do with these free Zooms, or free YouTube videos. So I'm removing masking just to see what I've got. And then if there's any adjustments I need to make, I'll make it at that point. But I think right now, I think our chess pieces are going to look pretty sparkly once we get these whites back. Come into my shadows. And the only thing I have left to do is to lift out in a couple of, I need to lift out a few sparkles in my shadows. All right, feel with your hand, you'll feel if you missed any areas of the masking by doing this with your hand. So I'm going to take a small brush, maybe just my masking brush for this, and It's a synthetic, so synthetic brushes have slightly stiffer bristles than the very soft squirrel hair brushes. So this is my masking brush. It's a synthetic, and I'm going to see what I can lift out of here. So to lift, here's the secret to lifting: is you go into an area and you blot, and then you do a little more and you blot until it is as light or not as light as you need it. But don't go and start pushing and making a hard, darker line around where you're trying to lift the color, because that always looks a little funny. So I'm going to come in with, I had said that there was a spot right through here that needed a highlight, so I'm going to blot that. It's not light enough, so I'll go again. And I'm not scrubbing the paper. You know, it doesn't have to be a scrub brush. It just needs to be slightly stiffer brush. And it's damp. It's not sopping wet. It's just damp. And I can create these little, very subtle little highlights and things in these reflections. And that's the way that the refracted light works quite often in watercolor. You get these weird patterns that form. And I won't get back to pure white. I mean, I'm not fooling anybody. I'm not going to get back to pure white. I'm just going to get back to lighter. And for me, that's fine. That's going to be good enough. Close enough. Let's lift some of this out. Just want to make sure I haven't missed any questions. All right, so ask your questions, because you know what? I have a 60-second delay before I see them. So, or before they pop up on my screen. So ask your questions now before I complete this, because I always feel bad when we get to the end of our demonstration and then I see a question after I've just closed the window or stopped the video, and then I see the questions like, oh no, now I can't answer. So ask it now. This paper towel, by the way, is clean and dry. Needs to be. Don't use a damp paper towel for blotting. Kind of defeats the purpose. And there's all kinds of just sort of crisscross type of design in here. It's kind of weird the way this looks, but patience. Takes a little patience to do this. And I could fuss, but I'm not going to do too much. But you can start to see, hopefully, some of those little abstract shapes that are in this reflected area, or in the shadow, refracted light that comes through glass. I think I'm actually attracted to some of these designs. I am noticing that, you know, this shadow is significantly darker than this one, so I'm going to just come in and darken that a little bit. Watercolor pencils. Have I ever used them for portraits? To be honest, I haven't. I use watercolor pencils more as a sketching kind of tool. I don't actually make my paintings out of watercolor pencils, but I suppose there's some people who do. I prefer paint. I guess maybe, you know, you get used to one thing, and paint is my medium. I do colored pencil, not watercolor pencil, but colored pencil. I do acrylic, I do oil, and they're all different. They're very different from each other. There, I like that better. I think that needed to be a little bit darker there. Maybe a little bit darker right in here. And in order to sort of fit in a dark area and not make it look like a patch, I'm coming around the outside of it with a damp brush to soften the edge. Now it doesn't look patched in, it looks like it was intentional. So, how the light's at the back of the fallen piece. Yeah, I would just have to stick with that a little bit longer and keep blotting as I go along. Now the color you use for your shadows can impact how much lifting you can do. And maybe when we do our demonstration and I use that lifting preparation, that will take you to or that will give you an indication. Yes, I have done pastel. In fact, I was working for a company that did, you know, those big signs that that you see in restaurants or bars, and you know it might have all the deals or the you know, it have illustrations of, you know, specialty drinks or salads or whatever the course may be. I used to do some of those, and those were done with pastel on chalkboard, and yeah, I got that out of my system. I'm done. And so I like chalk pastel. I'm not very fond of oil pastel. To me, it feels a little bit more like painting with using crayon. So I never really got into the whole oil pastel thing. But you know, some people love it, and they're very, very good at it, with beautiful results. All right, so there we go. I could, you know, I could come in, I could, like I said, I could fuss and I could do more and all that sort of thing. But you got the idea of what to do on this, and I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, you know what to do. So thanks very much. Go ahead and subscribe if you don't want to miss the future ones, and we'll see you next week, okay? Happy Valentine's Day in the meantime. Bye.